In this episode of the podcast, we're talking to Riana Milne. So Riana is a relationship expert and a published author of 2 best-selling books. Her list of accomplishments are pretty extensive, but she has over 40 years of experience in the space of coaching, and 20 of those years has been in the area of relationships. So as you can probably guess, we're going to talk about relationships. Why? Because they are pervasive to the human experience. They affect your happiness and quality of life at home, as well as in business, as well as in your friendships. It's such a critical piece to our overall life experience that it's worth studying and understanding. Now, specifically in this episode, we're going to dive quite a bit into childhood trauma and the effect that those have over our relationships. And I'll be having Riana use me as the guinea pig. Let's dive in. This is the TSS podcast. It's a place for authentic conversations to uncover the stupid, simple truths that help us succeed in business, create better relationships, and lead more fulfilling lives. Welcome to Think Stupid Simple. Riana, we have a little candle lighting ritual.
Very nice.
That we do at the beginning of each podcast. You know, I was thinking in the future, when we get back to doing these all live and in person, Anthony, what do you think about actually bringing the guests in and like, Riana, wouldn't it be cool to come in, get a headshot, like a new updated headshot? Because we're a photography studio.
Yeah, awesome. That would be great. I used to be a model and talent agent.
There you go.
So I understand headshots.
Yeah, come in, get a new headshot, sit down, do a podcast. You know,
that'll be awesome. Yeah.
Well, I am stoked that you're joining us. Thank you for coming onto the podcast. I'm excited to dive into
Thank you for having me.
Yes, you have a wealth of experiences. You've been in the relationship field for 40 years, I think I read.
Yes, in many ways. In Mindset for Success, I started teaching that in my 20s. And I had a model and talent agency for 10 years in the Erie, PA originally. So I was teaching small town people to think big and go for their dreams. So then they went out to IMTA, International Model and Talent Association, in July in LA, and New York in July in New York and January in LA. And they would compete for large city offers from top agencies and actually from around the world. And all my people were 100% and getting offers. And then they did competitions and they all went home with awards. So here, originally they would walk into the model and talent school and say, I want to be an actor. I want to be a model, you know, the big dream. Yeah. So let's make it happen. So I've been teaching mindset to many audiences, students in schools and kids in drug and alcohol centers and mental health wards and women from the prison system. So I've been doing mindset for 40 years. And the relationship work, I got certified as a clinical counselor, licensed mental health counselor in Florida and LPC in New Jersey in year 2000, I'm sorry. So 21 years I've been doing mental health work.
Wow.
And then I got certified as a coach 2009 and 10.
That's rad. So, and you currently reside in Florida?
Yeah, paradise.
How is it out there?
We got a beautiful sunny 81 degrees today.
Well, we have decent California weather, but there's a lot of trade-offs to being in California. And my business partners, I was telling them, like, let's think about Texas. And one of them was like, let's not do Texas, let's do Florida.
I'll tell you, Florida's pretty hot. It's I was on the beach all week and I was at a pool party on Sunday. You know, you can't beat it. My daughter and her husband recently moved to Austin. A lot of coaches are moving there.
Interesting.
Austin, Texas. It's a kind of cool up and coming place if you're thinking Texas. But she just escaped out of that snowstorm by coming to Miami for a week. I'm like, see, I told you, I should have moved to Florida.
That is a good escape. Yeah. That was wild. Okay, so I want to dive into this whole wealth of experience that you have in relationships. I have written a relationship book that I'm currently in the process of editing and actually getting published. And so the topic I find fascinating. I've been an amateur, I don't know what you would call it, a student of human psychology for 20 years. So the first thing that I want to ask is, what brought you specifically to the field of relationships? What was it 20 years ago?
Well, the part I'm known for as an expert is healing past childhood and love trauma.
Oh,
So my
interesting.
book that went to #1 bestseller, Love Beyond Your Dreams, Break Free
Yes.
of Toxic Relationships to Have the Love You Deserve. It's 400 pages. And that was based on my research after I had a traumatic relationship. I was married to someone who what I would call a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. To the
Hmm.
public, beautiful, charming, fun, outgoing. We traveled the world. We really had the ideal relationship, but he
From the outside.
self-sabotaged it. Yes, and my reality of what I lived with him, it was fabulous.
Yeah.
But what had happened was he sabotaged it by having a whole secret life. And it kind of exploded. He was a principal in a school. We were actually introduced by his school superintendent. So the sad thing was, he lost his job, his income, his reputation, ran out of town. And I decided to stand up as my own attorney and annul that marriage. So I did get the annulment. And I was actually talking to a divorce attorney last night. He goes, "You got an annulment?" He goes, "In
Yeah.
all my whole career, I was only able to win one. How did you get that?" And
Yeah,
I
that's
said
pretty
I was
unusual.
adamant in, getting out of this 5-year relationship. I said it was fraud and sociopathy that I could prove. And the judge says, "I've only given one annulment in 32 years of being a court judge, and yours is a second."
Yeah, so for
So,
those that don't necessarily know what the difference is, from what I understand, and correct me if I'm wrong, an annulment essentially means the marriage never existed, never happened. So
exactly.
both people wouldn't be like, you're not held responsible essentially for dividing assets and whatnot. Is that correct? Or how does that work?
Yes, it's as if it's never occurred.
As if it never occurred.
Right. Correct.
That is pretty wild. And that was in Florida when you got the annulment?
No, that was in New Jersey
In New Jersey.
before I moved to Florida. Yeah. So,
Crazy.
experiencing traumatic love myself, I was at what I call the base of this rainbow. You don't know what you don't know. You don't understand why this person is this way. And he even said to me the last thing, he goes, "I don't know why I sabotage everything I love." And
Hmm.
I said, "I don't know either, but I'm going to figure it out." Now, in my triple master's, and I was a good student, I graduated summa cum laude, right, with a
Hmm.
4.0. So we never heard the term childhood trauma. We never knew about the correlations of having unhealed past trauma, how it can interfere and sabotage your adult love relationships. So that's what started my research. I needed the answers for my own healing. Now, being a psychotherapist, I had 7 psychotherapist friends. So initially I was asking them,
Yeah.
what do you think he had? What do you think went on? And they couldn't give me any answers. It's like, I don't know. He surprised us. I don't know what he has. Because we knew it wasn't the standard bipolar, borderline, depression. It wasn't anything diagnosable that we had learned about. So this is a whole different animal that I wanted to figure out what it was. And once I started doing the research and cutting it into the love book, I had still so much more. So
Yeah.
I said, I have to go across the world with this message so people understand what childhood trauma is, how it often leads to love trauma, and how to heal it. So, as a coach globally, I help people from around the world that have unhealed childhood or love trauma. And that's how it came to be.
Interesting. I can, if you don't mind me asking, when you guys were married, what was that like in terms of, did you suspect anything was kind of going on, or was he doing a really great job of hiding that second life?
Well, the sociopath does a very good job of hiding. Yes.
Interesting.
And keep in mind, I'm a very busy lady. At the time, to
Yeah.
support my children, I was working 5 jobs.
Oh
So I
wow.
had a practice. I was working as a trauma specialist in the schools. I was teaching at Stockton University, future counselors for the drug and alcohol certification.
Hmm.
So I'm also Reverend Riana, so I was officiating a lot of weddings in the Atlantic City area. So there was a lot going on in my life, and I figured I don't have to babysit an adult. He's doing his work, I'm doing my work, and when we get together, we had a great time. So, you don't see anything until he got caught within the school.
Oh wow. Within the
And then
school.
his world exploded, and then my world exploded. So, in his privacy, I don't want to go much deeper than that into it,
Sure. Sure. Sure.
but that's how I came into understanding traumatic love relationships. So you start at this point of, I don't know what I don't know. I don't know what he has. I don't know why he did what he did. I'm going to figure it out. And all my clients feel the same way when they come to me. And then it's a learning curve, like a rainbow. So they become very empowered. I do mindset for success. There's a spirituality component. We have to heal the original trauma from childhood. That's always first. And then once they're feeling great about the life, creating the life they desire, which is part one of what I do, then we go into the relationship part. So I work with singles and couples and straight and LGBTQ clients. And then also those 16 to 26 or 30 are kind of failure to launch. They can't get off their parents' couch. They're afraid to go out and work. College wasn't really successful, or, the kids today are really struggling with COVID situation. So I do life transition work for them as well.
And that's where a lot of the mindset comes in, I imagine.
Yeah. It's for everyone. The mindset work is for everyone. Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting. I had, it was kind of my own personal experiences that led to beginning to research what became what I wrote. But it kind of came from a very similar place, and being 2 weeks into my own marriage and spending kind of a youth really not understanding relationships, but trying to, like, I read a lot and I did what I was supposed to be doing. But I found myself 2 weeks into a marriage that went 14 years. And I was seeing a counselor and reading and right at that point, 2 weeks in, not knowing, okay, I have no idea still what a healthy relationship looks like. And I'm going to try and figure this out for myself. And what was wild to me was getting at the end of this journey of 14 years of counseling and research and book after book after book, and still not knowing.
That's because we did not dive deep into your childhood original traumas. And that's what everyone's learning. Like, they went to 7 years of therapy and they came to me for my introductory session. They're like, oh my God, I learned more in 1 hour. Something I never heard about in 7 years of therapy. So that's the real shock. And like I said, I didn't know this either. So I totally understand that. So once we identify that, then we can definitely start the healing process. And
so what might that be? Can you use me as your guinea pig? Can you show our audience what that would look like?
Well, first, I like to analyze what childhood traumas you have. And I developed in 2012 the childhood trauma checklist. So it's a simple checklist of 10 things. I can briefly go through that. You can write down which ones you have, and then I can start making some correlations for you. And the audience can play along with us too and write that down. And just so they know, this came from, working many, many years with people of trauma. So I worked in the grades kindergarten all the way through college as a specialty counselor called a SAC, student assistance counselor. I worked in Atlantic Care, which was a hospital setting, a ward for children 5 through 19 that were there for suicide, cutting, runaways, depression, anxiety, and other things, eating disorders, so on. Then I worked in the teen alcohol and drug center, and then, like I said, women from the prison system. So all these different people, different ages, backgrounds, cultures, still were showing that these top 10 were most prevalent. And it's the same as my ex-husband. So I put them down, and that's when I started doing the correlations, and it made total sense. So as we go through them, I just want your listeners to know this is not about blaming your mom and dad at this stage of life or feeling ashamed in any way that you may have these. Keep in mind, as a child, you're just a product of your environment. You're young, you're innocent, you just do the best you can. And then children develop certain coping mechanisms that help them survive or tolerate the situation a little better. And then with that, very often those patterns become norms or normalized behavior that just keep showing up again and again as an adult. And then you don't really realize it because they're just so much a part of you at that point, which is a part of your unconscious, right? So we have to make them consciously aware, and then heal those, change the behavioral patterns, go from unconscious to full conscious awareness, which takes time, using the mindset and creating goals around the dreams and so forth. Okay, so let's get into the top 10 traumas.
I want to, before you jump into this, I want to say, because a lot of our listeners are coming from a standpoint of, a lot of them are artists, a lot of them are business people, entrepreneurs. And the reason that this topic to me is so fascinating is because relationships are pervasive in the way that they extend and touch every aspect of our
That's
lives. Like, I
right.
mean, the energy that you either lose or gain at home affects you in the workplace. It affects you in other relationships. And you think that, for 14 years, I spent so much time trying to figure out my relationship. And eventually, when that didn't work out, I realized how much time I actually had to spend with my children, to work on my business, to work on myself and finding a new and healthy relationship. And it was wild to me. It was wild to see what, essentially what I had accomplished across 10 years in business, I was able to redo within 3 years after the
Yeah,
divorce. So that's how much time and energy was going to it. So it becomes such a fascinating topic because it affects everything. So I just wanted to say that for our
sure
listeners, because they might
does.
be like, why is Pi so into relationships?
And it's the same thing too with unhealed trauma. It will touch every avenue of your life.
Yeah.
So when I clear up the trauma for my clients, then all of a sudden they're excelling in the job market, or they're winning that interview that they really wanted, or creating that business now without fear,
Yeah.
right? The
Yeah.
studies show 8 out of 10 people have 8 out of 10 negative fear-based thoughts.
Yeah.
So as a talent agent, when I was working with my models, actors, singers, dancers, and they didn't believe in themselves, why? The original message is, you can't do that. You're from a small town. You'll
It
never
goes
make
back
it.
to
You're going to
that.
look like a fool out there. So all those messages, right, fill who you feel you believe you are. So we have to
Yeah.
clean all that up. So
And it
let's go through
starts with
the
that
top
childhood
10.
trauma.
Now,
I love
yes,
it.
and there are more than 10, by the way, but these are the top 10 that I saw keep showing up. So the first one is if your parents had any addictions. Now, being a drug and alcohol counselor as well, I named 12 addictions that I have seen interfere with that parent-child relationship. So the
I'm
obvious
going to
two
jot
are
these down.
drugs and
Okay.
alcohol. But then there's also sex, meaning you knew your parent was a chronic cheater, but it was you were part of the secret.
Okay.
Porn use, gambling, hoarding, spending, eating, gaming, TV watching,
Hmm.
workaholism, and even social media addiction.
Okay.
And quieting a kid by putting them on a machine versus playing with them and interacting with them.
Hmm.
And I hate to see that today because we're really building dependency with children on machines. Okay, so the second
That's
one
wild.
is, yeah, the verbal messages. Just like I explained, saying you could never make it in the talent business. Why are you
Yeah.
even going to modeling school? Those slight put downs where parents just think that's conversation. Well, it's not. It's instilling doubt in your child. So this could be watching mom and dad yelling and screaming at each other. It could have been them yelling at you. It could
Hmm.
have been these slight messages, never hearing the words, I love you, never hearing compliments or I'm proud of you. Great job, kiddo. Those messages that mean so much to a child. If they don't get them on a regular basis, it can really hurt their self esteem.
Okay.
Okay, so that's number two. Number three is emotional abuse and neglect. Number four is physical abuse, rape, or molestation. Now, those could have happened inside and out or outside of the home. Any of these things could have. Some people might have had ideal situations in the house, but once they went to school, they might have been bullied and beat up every day,
Hmm.
right? So it's a whole childhood experience we're talking about.
I see.
Okay. Yes. The next one is very important. That's abandonment. And there's two types I describe, fault and no fault abandonment. Now, a no fault abandonment would be like if a parent happened to die early. It's not their fault, but it really leaves emptiness within inside that child. If they go off to war for their country, working in the elementary school was a time of the Afghanistan war. And I'll tell you, there were so many kids just checked out, like
Yeah.
almost blank on their faces. They were so worried that mom or dad would come home alive. They were worried every moment of every day. And when their anxiety is up,
Mm.
cortisol is up, and memory and learning is down. So,
Hmm.
so many kids going through various traumas were identified ADHD, and they really were not. They
Interesting.
were going through trauma.
Yeah.
And I identified that early on. And when I was in the elementary school, I had kids meditating in my office. We did music therapy, like to Louis Miguel. It's like, Miss Riana, put that Mr. Louis on. I'm upset today. It's really adorable. And I don't speak Spanish, but the music is soothing, right? So you can use music therapy to calm everything.
Yeah.
And then I was doing positive parenting. So there's all these different techniques for kids and students that are really important for parents and teachers to know. Another type of no-fault abandonment is if your parent supports the family by being away from home a lot. They travel a lot.
Gotcha.
And that was one of mine. I remember asking, when's dad coming home? And we find out many years later, he was FBI and CIA. And he couldn't tell the family where he was. My mom
wild.
didn't even know. So I remember that one. Okay, so fault abandonment would be the parent was never involved in the child's life. They were involved while the couple was together or married, and then they barely see them if the couple broke up. And then third, there's even a part like emotional abandonment when the father or mother is still involved with the child. So in other words, they're just not active in the home. They come home from work, they eat dinner, they sit in front of the TV, they barely talk to the kid. They don't go to the kids' events, not the sport events, the arts events, none of that. So they're not emotionally involved or connected. That is a form of fault, emotional abandonment. Okay. All right. The next one would be if you were a part of the foster care system, adopted, or needed to go live in other people's homes because your parents lost their house or they had too many kids or they couldn't take care of you there. That even means going to grandma's house or an aunt and uncle's house. It's still you were removed from your parents. Trauma number 7 is one that most people can identify with. And that one is personal trauma. So that's if you were bullied, if you remember feeling different as a child. So you could have been a chubby, overweight child and teased at school, or skinny and gawking, called the nerd. You might have been a teen trying to come out as gay or lesbian, teased for that because you just looked different or acted different. You might have been the only African-American teenager in an all-Caucasian school, therefore never feeling like you fit in. So many people can identify with this part of personal trauma.
Yeah,
that's
I don't
a big
know
one.
Anybody that escapes their childhood without that piece.
Yeah. And the research shows 9 out of 10 people have at least 1 to 3 of these top 10 traumas. And the interesting thing is, they said the other 10% that says they have nothing are the sociopaths, because nothing's ever wrong with them. It's everybody else.
Nothing's affected them.
Right? Yeah. So nothing's wrong with them. Okay. Let's see. So the next one is sibling trauma. So this is if your sibling bullied you, if they were born maybe with a medical issue, so they needed more of mom's and dad's time. Or most oftenly, they were perceived as the golden child. So the favored one of mom or dad. So they might have been the star athlete, more handsome, more beautiful, the better student. You know those sayings, why can't you be as good in school as your brother is? Always compared to the other child. So that makes it difficult. And then trauma number 9 has 2 parts. One of the other traumas beyond 10, since I'm a baby boomer, I was growing up, this one was barely present in my life, which was community trauma. And now, since year 2000, we've got mass shootings, school shootings, more severe Mother Earth events like mudslides, fires, floods, hurricanes, snowstorms that are impacting, communities in a huge way. And now look at our world. We have COVID. So anyone that says they've never experienced trauma or have no kids that are experiencing trauma, there's one of your 3 right there. That is a global pandemic that's impacting all of us, right? So these community-based traumas seem to be getting more and more prevalent. And then part 2 of 9 is family trauma. So of course, if you're impacted in the community, your family's often impacted as well. So if you lose your job due to COVID, now you can't pay the bills for the home and you might lose your house. Family trauma also not related to community would be if a parent was incarcerated, if you grew up in poverty or in a dangerous neighborhood, you remember feeling anxious. If you're a military family, here in the U.S., our military families move every 2 to 4 years. thus placing, kids in new schools every couple of years. And just remember that there's a lot of lack messages. So if you hear we can't pay the bills, or we may not have money to keep the house, and you grow up hearing these lack messages, you may become an entrepreneur that wants your own business, goes so far, and then you're scared to death to make an investment in yourself to go further. Because you have those messages, or verbal, the trauma number 2, there's verbal messages. You'll never make it. You won't amount to anything. Right. So these are all so subtle, but working together forms the adult personality. So we have to break all these messages. And then trauma number 10 is if there was mental health in mom and dad, mental health issues. The 2 most difficult for children to navigate is bipolar and borderline. So borderline personality would be fast trigger anger, extreme moodiness. When they're good, they're really great, but when they're bad, they're horrid, and you don't know what you're going to get. They have really fast anger at things that nobody else would get mad at. Yeah. Right. So that leaves a kid always walking on eggshells. And then bipolar is manic depressive. So that depression can show up as either just extreme fatigue, checking out emotionally, or even anger. And a manic phase could be a gambling spree, an eating binge, a spending spree, which can impact the whole family. Because if the family's struggling financially, but someone has a spending addiction, it's hurting the whole family even more so. It's just a temporary fix, right? Like any addiction. So those are the top 10. So how many do you have?
I have 6 of your 10.
Okay, there you go. So, I mean, that's what I said. Most people would not look at these as traumas until you really think back and look at it with the child's mind, right? With a child's reaction when these showed up in your household. So the next thing I have to do, Pi, is that severity level from 1 to 10, with 10 being most severe. A 2 or a 3 as you remember it, and it wasn't a happy time. Let's say someone got hit by the belt twice. They weren't thrilled about that, but they recognize as an adult, maybe I give that a 3. But someone that's beat every day from an alcoholic father, that would have been a 9 or 10 severity, of course.
Okay, so I'll walk you through them because I'm very curious where you go from there and what you see from that, especially when it comes to the relationships that I've chosen in my life. So verbal messages, 100%. So like I was, the son of an immigrant father, the expectations are really high.
May I ask what culture you came from?
Iranian.
Okay. Yes. Very high expectations of the son.
And especially when it comes to like STEM. So when it comes to any math, science, that kind of stuff, which was stuff that I was not geared for. So there was always that kind of, why can't you, why aren't you? That kind of talk. And none of these things like, I think my father did an incredible job, and my dad was a single father. So when we get to the next one, physical abuse, I was bullied throughout my it's basically throughout elementary school, junior high school, as well as early, most of it ended in junior high, but I lived in Utah among mostly Caucasians during the Gulf War. So before the Gulf War, it was, he's just different, and there was just kind of like casual racism. During the Gulf War, it became like being attacked on a daily basis.
Sorry. Yeah. It's horrendous.
It's crazy like because it still goes on right now.
Our Asian friends are going through that right now too.
Yeah. And I'm sitting here like, I keep saying to myself, like, things have gotten better, but then this happens in the Asian community, and you're like, okay, maybe not. Like, maybe this is, anyway. So physical abuse, yes. I think my father was also, he'd spank me, but I think that I wouldn't register that as high on the scale.
Okay.
That was just kind of normal, for our culture and whatnot. Number 5, abandonment. Yes.
One thing about that, Pi, though. Okay, so when kids would come to me and saying, well, it's just normal I get hit by the belt or the switch, which means choosing a tree branch to be beat with. Well, no, that's just normal for us. It's like, honey, that's not normal, right? So when you say spanking, I have to really break that down. Was just that a pat on the behind, or, you're grounded for an hour, you grounded for 3 months and you can't do a thing, so punishment severity has to be broken down as well.
there
Yeah.
were a few times where it was excessive. Okay, number
So we
five.
can't fluff over that. If it
Yeah.
was
So
excessive, we might have to give that like a 6 or a 7, you
yeah,
know?
you're probably right. That would
Okay.
probably get the school side of that was definitely a 10. The home
Oh,
side probably like a 5 or 6.
yeah.
Okay, so abandonment. Yes, my parents were divorced. My mother dropped me off on my dad's doorstep, sick and ready to die. My dad took over and did an amazing
How
job raising
old
me,
were
but
you at that time?
I was 2 at the time, but I grew up knowing essentially that, mom didn't really want a part of our lives. So I
Okay,
would
going
say
a
that
little
that
deeper with that pie, like you may not remember so much as a 2-year-old child, but the mother-child bond was severely broken from 0 to 2,
for sure, for sure,
right? Even though your dad stepped up and really did his best that he knew how. There's that attachment, which is part of attachment theory, right?
for
That,
sure.
that was lost, even though you're not consciously aware of it. There's some things that would play a part there.
I noticed those things later in life, 100%.
Yes.
The Okay, so number 6, no adoption, foster care. Number 7, personal trauma. Yes, the
Yes.
racism, bullying, name calling. That would be a 10. Number 8, sibling trauma. I didn't have kids, but I was. So my dad did have a tendency to compare me to friends who were good at like STEM areas. Why can't you be more
Why can't
like,
you be like, yeah,
So I'd probably say like a 4 or 5 on that side. Community
okay.
trauma, maybe through the Gulf War aspect of that, and kind of living in a culture that I didn't really fit in.
Utah was
Let's
an
see,
interesting choice to move to from
it
your
was.
country.
And then number 10,
Yeah.
mental health issues. Yes, my father has anxiety amongst some other kind of things that are going on. But yes, that was something. And my birth mother, is very much not there and mentally.
Okay.
So I've got
So,
a hard 6, maybe even 7 of your 10.
okay. Okay. So, again, I mean, there's 5 assessments my clients do if they meet with me for 1 hour. It's my introductory session for like $47. It's ridiculously cheap. I usually charge 500 for it.
Hmm.
But you can just see one area that starts defining what's going on. So, without knowing you, and audience, we never even chatted before this at all. We just did emails through our assistants to
Hmm.
get on this call. So, I can make some guesses, some summaries without knowing anything about your marriages. But the attachment piece is going to be very big for you. The unconscious need to attach for a woman, tied with trauma number 7, which was the bullying, never feeling good enough, which is the underlying message. So there may have been on your part some jealousy, some control, um, fears that your partner might leave you, because the attachment of really wanting love. Um, the not feeling good enough, comparing in the cultural thing, your dad to other young men. um, you may have a little bit of defiance or impulsivity to act out, to do your own thing, to prove yourself, but you're going to be an extremely hard worker to
Yeah.
prove. In a way, my book Live Beyond Your Dreams, about the mindset for success, it's called the watch me attitude. When people put you down, tell you you're not good enough, you'll never make it. And this is what I was teaching my models, actors, singers, dancers in my 20s when I opened my talent school at 26. And I was teaching them this mindset for success. No matter what these messages are, you can make it if you believe in yourself, right? And that's a very deep teaching, that I spend the entire 6 months teaching to make sure they have it down. But that would make you a very hard worker, and consciously to prove, in a way, see, dad, see how good I am, see how successful I am. So that's just a few things I wanted to put out there.
Yeah. So let me unpack a
Perfectionism,
couple of
you
those.
want things just right.
Yeah.
Um, and you were probably very smart in school. Again, you may have found love. You might have been the teacher's pet, especially the female teachers, like charming.
Hmm.
Um, but also worked hard so in a way you could then make your father proud as the good student. So those are just some summary guesses. Are any of them close?
Yeah, I would say a lot of them are very close. So yes, I have since I was 20. I didn't used to think this way, but going into like I was 18, 19 years old, I thought really I couldn't do much of anything. I had no aspirations. And then I actually went and did 2 years of service work. I
Okay.
became Mormon living in Utah. I'm not practicing now, but I became Mormon. I went on a 2-year mission, and it was wonderful. I learned that I was supposed to learn the second hardest language in the world, and everybody around me, including my father, my closest friends, were like, "I don't think you can do this." And I was like, "That's dumb. If you guys believe in God, don't you think that this should actually be learnable?" So I went onto that, and I had the experience of not only did I learn the language, but I learned Cantonese and Mandarin, and I could speak them
Wow.
without accent, and I can still speak them fluently.
That's
And
amazing.
that experience gave me the "F you, you don't know what you're talking about" mentality.
Right.
So
Good.
from that point forward, it was like, I don't care what you say. It was very much the "I'm going to do my own thing and I'm going to prove you wrong" attitude,
Watch me mindset.
the
Yeah, and
watch me mindset.
attitude. Yes. Yep.
The my first marriage, well, my only marriage, is the epitome of kind of not like basically I took the first person who loved me or who said openly, that they like I was in so much need for that relationship from that standpoint. I think,
Yeah, because Pi, you miss the mother bond, right? The mother female love bond. And even when these relationships get toxic, and I don't know your relationship story, but if there is a lot of fighting and anger, you'll break up, but then you'll get back together. Then you'll
mhm,
break up and you'll get back together. And consciously, you would say, this relationship's not healthy. But unconsciously, you crave that love so much with an abandonment like you had that you'll keep going back, trying to get whatever love that you could get at that
yeah,
point from this woman, right? Even though consciously you knew this probably was not the right relationship for you. So it
yeah,
doesn't surprise me that you attach strongly to the first woman, female, that says, I love you. That makes
yeah.
sense. Mm-hmm.
And then I would say that we did that break up, get back together thing within the marriage. So we were married very quick. It's kind of very typical in
Yes.
Utah culture. And 2 weeks in, I knew this is really, we actually knew prior to, we both had even talked about it, like maybe this is not a good idea.
Okay.
But there's so much social stigma around canceling a engagement, canceling a wedding. You're going to be once you're married, then you're going to be divorced and all that kind of stuff. There was so much social pressure in that environment that
Yeah, there
once we
is.
were in, we stayed in, and then it became this like fighting back and forth. And I would say, you mentioned jealousy. I would say that lasted for a couple years. And
Mm-hmm.
then I took on the mindset of kind of, you would be dumb to cheat on me. And that lasted for the rest of, like, I didn't even think of it as a consideration because I'm like, this would be like, why would you do something like that?
Mm-hmm. Another thing that can happen, Pi, with your situation is that you would put a lot of perfectionism on this woman or any
Hmm.
woman. Like she's got to be the perfect partner. She's got to look a certain way, act a certain way, do things in a perfect way. And the reason is, again, unconsciously, all this is unconscious. You would dream about the perfect woman, right?
I definitely
Because
did
you
that.
didn't have
Yeah.
your mom. So the perfectionism could be very high in you, placed on your partner. That puts a lot of pressure on the typical normal female that's not going to be perfect. No, nobody's perfect, right? But when there's perfectionism messages keep coming over and over and over again to the woman, it gets very hard to stay in that relationship or she'll get angry.
I did that probably to the nth degree because
Mm-hmm.
in addition to, yes, I have a perfectionist mindset already, but in addition to that, my ex-wife is Chinese and English was not her native language, and she wasn't comfortable living
Okay.
in Utah. So in basic social situations, she would stay quiet or say weird things or offend people or things that are just mistakes. But I
Sure.
would be very hard on the like why aren't you just just say something. Why can't you just say something? When I introduce you, like speak to people. And so
Yeah.
I was 100% doing that. Yes.
Now, was your father like stereotypical from the Iranian male culture, which can be very dominant, very alpha male? Was he that way, or was he more contemporary?
I would say he was a good mixture of that, probably more
Okay.
so. 20 years ago, when it was like 25 years ago when he and my stepmother married, he was probably very much on the alpha male Iranian side, 70%, 30%.
Yeah.
Then over time and the kind of butting of heads, my stepmom and him took more of a balanced role, but that was a 10-year process.
Right. That takes a while. So again, what you might have seen as the normal type of relationship growing up with that, this is what man and woman should be in a relationship. So your social norms or your family norms are also put into your personality, right? This is what you were witnessed as normal between what a man should be and a woman should be. So you saw that in a lot of impressionable young years. So you
100%.
might
And
have come off, yeah, very
it's the
strong
reason
alpha
that
male.
well, it's probably the reason that I thought the issues that we were having were just normal. They were not normal. The issues that my
Yeah.
my wife and I were having were not normal. I can look back and see that. But at the time, I kept making comparisons back to my dad and saying, "Well, we're still doing better than, what I have seen. So, we're okay."
Yeah. Yeah.
For sure. So, yeah, most of the things that you said very much resonated. I can't remember what were the other pieces, but
Some one thing that you could have had, a lot of women have this one, is people pleasing. So maybe I don't know how you handled your conflict as a young person. So maybe just pleasing people to death so that they wouldn't be angry or pick a fight with you. That's normally a girl's response, but some young men will do that as too, just trying to be overly nice to everybody, to be everybody's friend so that they don't bully you. So people pleasing could be one. Fast trigger anger due to the frustration, never being told how to handle anger. Like none of us are really told that. Sometimes blaming behavior can happen. Lying or manipulation can come out. Um, lying to cover up the mistakes that you might be making. And if addiction's a part of it, of course, lying is always a part of addiction. Covering up how much porn you're watching or how much alcohol you're drinking or how much gambling you're doing or spending you're doing, right?
yeah.
If there's an addiction involved, then there's always lying as a part of that. And when couples come to me and their partner does have an addiction issue, I always say the addiction will come first. You
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
love someone enough to make the addiction stop. So, some addictions are formed out of childhood trauma. Let's say chronic cheating, men who have abandonment from mother, or a toxic mother son relationship may be prone to cheating because when their woman is not perfect in their mind, they're like, well, then I'll find one who does treat me like I should be treated, quote unquote, right?
Yeah.
So they look for that adoration from other women, or it could be a bit of a flirt, or go back to high school friends and start flirting with them. Women do this too, so it's not just a man thing. But that could be because of that mother-child bond was disrupted.
Yeah, I definitely resonate on the people pleasing side. I think that's always been a part of my personality, wanting others to like me. I mean, even
Yeah.
the going back to when I quit my job, one of the first things my dad said was, you're quitting your profession. I was a CPA at the time for Ernst
Hmm.
and Young, so a large firm. Like this is the
Yeah, that's a
destination
great
for
friend.
most people. And I was like, I hate this. I'm gonna quit and I'm gonna be a photographer. And I told my dad, and that was a mistake.
Oh,
And he was like, had I known this when you were
do
in
the
college,
photography first, build that
yeah,
up, then say, hey, Dad, guess what? I have a viable studio.
yeah. So he was
Yeah.
like, that's a mistake, and your college education was a waste, and all this kind of stuff. And again, I was like, no, Dad, just watch. I'll show you. And it was like 5 years later, I walked him over to the studio, and he saw this whole thing, and And so pleasing my father even became like a thing for me. Going through college, I was never a good
Yes.
student in high school. And then when I went to college, my father was like, as long as your grades are up, I'll help pay. And I was at the point where I go, Dad, I know that I can learn now. I know I can actually do things, you know.
Hmm.
And so I, like yourself, I graduated summa cum laude in 4 years with 2 degrees,
Excellent.
just to kind of also be like, I told you so.
Yeah.
The wanting the affection of other people, I think that I never. It's funny because the people that I have explained my story to have always assumed that I cheated. And when I say like no, that's never a thought in my mind was to have an emotional or to go cheat or to do anything. That piece seems to not make sense to a lot of people. They go, I don't see how you're able to go 14 years. And I think for a big piece, like I do have certain values. I'm no longer practicing Mormon, but I do have a lot of values that are derived from that. And
Spiritual values are really important. So that would play a big part in you if you grew up Mormon. Yes,
yeah, so I never
that would
thought,
play a big part.
to me, it never made sense, looking at a problem, it never made sense to go and fix the problem by creating another problem. So, so I was like, that never was something that crossed my mind. But I could see how, you know, the circumstances, if it weren't for that value piece, I could see how that would definitely play a factor.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
So,
spirituality is very important.
Rihanna, this is
So did
so
I do pretty
entirely,
good?
yes, you did great. But I'm about to ask, this is so entirely effed up that if you see a relationship like mine, where I have so much of these rooted traumas, my ex likely did as well. We're married. This thing is incredibly toxic. And even if you were to resolve those things, you would still be two completely different individuals that just happen to kind of like trauma bond.
So let me explain what happens, Pi. When I have a couple that comes in, and this is a great question that you're asking, I must heal the traumas for partner A and partner B.
Yeah.
And the third entity is the relationship. So once I understand deeply what you each went through and how this comes out and plays, and we just named all your characteristics, then I would have to find all hers. And then how it's intermixing in yours relationship and your marriage and how you were fighting over it. Now I teach you the communication skills that when one of you is triggered, you own it and you talk differently about it. So let's say you got a phone call from your father in the car right before you walked into the house. He said something that triggered you. We call this emotional trigger about, son, I told you not to do that. I told you you couldn't do it. Right. So you get emotionally upset
Yeah.
unconsciously because that trauma is deep rooted in the brain and the body cells. So you get re-triggered, you go in the house in a bad mood. She's there, oh, he's mad at me again. So she takes it personally, which is typical in a marriage. So instead, you're feeling that, you identify it. It's like, okay, just was triggered because my dad did message number, trauma
Yeah.
number 2, verbal messages. I'm feeling it. When I get in the house, I'm going to say, hon, listen, I just had a pretty bad phone call from my dad. I just need like 20 minutes to de-escalate. I'm going to go take a hot shower. Then I'll
Mm-hmm.
help you with dinner. Now, while you're alone, you know all these different techniques I teach people to self-soothe, reparent yourself, do the capping and correcting of what was said. There's all these little techniques that I use. Then you come back out. She understands it's not about her now. She didn't do anything wrong. And you're able within that amount of time to easily calm yourself down and come out and have a normal and good evening with her. So the problem is most people have these traumas. They don't know why their partners are upset or moody, and then they think it's personal, something's wrong with me. And those messages are just like this, volcano spinning all the time. So that's how I have to heal a couple. And then, I ran into a couple of mine who was the man was very close with his mother, kind of like a mama's boy, I would call him.
Mm-hmm.
So the mother, whatever she said, she got her way, and he always took the mother's request over the wife.
Yeah.
And the wife had it, right?
Yeah.
And he didn't see it. But the father was not in the picture early on. So this man became her support system completely, and the mother couldn't break it. So I identified what was going on and how they needed to recommunicate around that. And I even asked to see the mother. And I said, do you want their marriage to last? Now you have grandchildren. You have to learn to eloquently step out and learn the times you can. Like, she would call 5-6 times a day and he would pick up the phone. I said, you can't pick up the phone every time she goes. Well, what if it's an emergency? That clinging codependency. So I had to break the codependency of the two and make them really consciously aware of what they were doing. Well, the couple is doing great. I ran into them at a pool party. She grabs me. She goes, oh my God, I got to introduce you to all my friends. There was like 20 people there. Mm-hmm. This is the coach that saved our marriage, And she goes, and we're still doing great. And we're still doing all the techniques that you taught us. And she goes, they work. And that was just such a nice validation, like 5 years later. And the people that have healed and gone on to marry, since I'm an officiant, many of them have flown me back to Atlantic City awesome. That I was working in year 2000. And I've married them, and they're together 12 years, 16 years. I mean, even my LGBTQ population are marrying and having very successful marriages. So it's really rewarding work. I really love what I do. It's quite interesting because everyone is very different. Not everyone is coming to me with the exact same issues or severity of issues, right? So it's like everyone's their own puzzle that we work as a team, and it's very interactive. My clients get a 150-page workbook, and they fill out assessments like that childhood trauma checklist. They would just check yes or no. Yeah. And then one of our sessions would be diving deeper into that. And because you have this, is this coming out? And then we tie together, like we did for you, what was showing up. And then we start fixing that and healing that. That's how the process works.
I love it. I'm curious from the standpoint of, and I think it's interesting because in the beginning of what I've written in the book that I write, this book is not about dealing with childhood trauma. For that, you actually need to go to somebody to like you need to get that stuff out. It's come a real through
specialty area.
Yeah. You've come through the other side, and you are. My whole book addresses what does a healthy relationship actually look like. That's what I wanted to ask you in a minute, but it starts with after that place. Like you need to address the childhood trauma first. That is a completely separate book. That's completely separate. I honestly think you have to meet with someone like yourself to do that. But my issue with counseling has always been this. Number one, what you described does require that both people are committed and in it. They have to both be willing to come to the table and actually do the work. So in my specific case, my ex, her beliefs, and it's not to say anything about her person, just her beliefs was that counseling is not effective, and it's also an embarrassment.
That's the cultural norms. That's exactly correct.
So culturally, it was not acceptable. Number two, when you come to the table with you look at the trauma and then you look past the trauma and just look at a fundamentally off relationship. Just across the board, from value systems to, everything that we believe is just so misaligned. I don't know how you fix that in weekly or bi-weekly 1-hour sessions.
So there's a lot going on in my coaching program. It's really one of a kind. First of all, I am CCTP, Certified Clinical Trauma Professional. And my methods is a hybrid. I do a lot of psychotherapy techniques because I know about them, but my delivery is really coaching. And coaching is more educational, interactive, motivational, spiritual, inspirational. I have Live and Love books for my clients to read, the 2 books that did end up in Barnes & Noble stores, and then the worksheets that we do step by step. So that it is very interactive, and it's very interesting you said about a couple. See, I would have taken you individually because right now, for example, I have a man that came in from Nebraska. His wife says, nope, I just want to keep going to couples counseling. He goes, well, we've been in there a year. Not as that not getting better, it's getting worse, and I'm about to leave. So I know I have childhood trauma. I know I have anger issues. So he was very astute in being very upfront with me. And he goes, no matter what, I got to fix myself. And then I want to decide, am I happy in this marriage? Is it me that's screwing it up? And either way, I'm going to fix myself to help the marriage or go out and be a single, but a good single to meet an emotionally healthy person. But I have to be emotionally healthy first. And I said, exactly. So I took him on as a client. And I've never met the wife. I hear her sometimes walk by and she goes, thank you, Riana. Whatever you're doing is really working.
Mm-hmm.
She, and I said, we has 20 sessions over 6 months. So I said, well, if she decides she wants to jump on, she can. However, we are going to do you in completion. And because when one person changes, the dynamic of the relationship changes too.
Correct.
Right? So he was either going to become confident enough to just love himself, which he's at now. He loves himself, loves his life, lost weight, is killing it in business right now, and feels personally sexy and attractive and charming, has total mood management, into the spirituality, mentoring a younger kid, holding a men's group at his church. He's just like on fire right now.
Mm-hmm.
And now she is really attracted
Yeah.
because he lost what we would call your mojo, right? I
Yeah.
said, are you the same person she married? He goes, no. I've been sitting on the couch during COVID. I'm miserable. I got heavy. I'm like, we got to get you back right now. So that's all we focused on: him, his life, his goals, his desires, his dreams, and then what is an emotionally healthy relationship. He hasn't even gotten into the relationship stuff yet. He's one of my current clients, but his
Mm-hmm.
whole life has changed. So that's when I either would help him more with the marriage or he would be moving on. But he wants to save his marriage, and it is working. He's
Yeah.
learning to talk through the issues. Before, he would yell or be passive aggressive or shut down. And I would explain to him the woman's number one need in cave woman brain, her old reptilian brain, is safety
Mm-hmm.
and to feel secure no matter what. So if a guy's yelling and screaming at her, then wants to be intimate, 2 hours later, she's not feeling it. She's all, set down. And a woman needs to make love with her five senses ignited, right? This is just how we are hardwired. So if a woman's not feeling safe, she's not feeling intimate. So many couples are getting this wrong, because they don't understand even the basic physiology of male female and what a woman really needs and what the guy really needs. So, I have to teach them that education as well. But I can work with one person. I had another elderly couple. She came into coaching. She goes, I need to know how to have a better life because I'm leaving my husband. And
Mm-hmm.
she was like 72,
Oh,
40
wow.
years of marriage. And I said, are you
Yeah.
sure you want to do this? It's not easy out there in single world,
Yeah.
and he won't come in. I've asked him for years, so I'm just doing it to help me. I said, then let's work with you. So
Mm-hmm.
I started working with her. She lost weight. She started dressing more hip and more desirable. We did her hair makeovers. I mean, that's from the talent thing. I used to do makeovers for everyone, but to make them feel just beautiful about themselves, right? My men and my
Mm-hmm.
women. And, she was learning all these skills. And one day he picked up the Love Beyond the Dreams book, which is 4 sections. And the first section is the toxic personalities that can break your heart. And he calls me and he goes, Riana, this is so-and-so's husband. I'm like, yeah, how are you? And he goes, I think I better come in. I said, I told you were welcome anytime. But what changed your mind? He goes, well, I picked up this book and I probably have about 7 or 8 of the things that are defined as toxic.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe I better look at fixing myself. He was a blamer. It was all her fault,
Yeah.
right? And he was a chronic cheater. And there was a lot she was dealing with. I don't blame her for being unhappy and finally just saying, I've had it.
Mm-hmm.
So I worked with him and his traumas and her traumas and taught them the new communication style. They moved from that house where he was having affairs behind her back in their home and bought a gorgeous new home and have this happy, beautiful, retired life now.
Well, bless her for sticking
So,
with it. Goodness.
yeah.
That would be.
Well, he totally changed.
Yeah.
He knew his anchor. He could play as long as he had the anchor.
Mm-hmm.
Now she was gone. And he had some other abandonment issues.
Yeah.
So,
have you ever been in a situation where it's so convoluted and you've worked through one person and the other person is not there? Because once again, the process requires that both people eventually come to the table, or that one person is already whole, but it requires ownership. One person has to take ownership. If not, both people have to take ownership. If one person's already good and whole, then the other person has to take ownership and do the work.
Right.
But have
That's
you ever
right.
been in a situation where you would look at me and say, I don't think this is going to work out. Like, this is not healthy for you.
I never give up on my people if they came to me as a couple, but I do have that clause if they decide not to stay together. I finish off their sessions individually to help them move
Mm-hmm.
forward or to help them negotiate a divorce. I have had, I'm thinking, two occasions in my mind where the woman who said she wanted to have the marriage work ended up cheating on her husband. And she denied it. And he really felt it happened, and he had some proof that it happened. He saw a text or something. So his decision was, I want to leave the marriage. And I said, I think she is having her cake and eating it too. She has to know what happens when her cake is gone. You're gone. And
Mm-hmm.
you need to start rebuilding your life. And let's see what happens for you. And let's see what happens for her. So the affair did not work out. And she starts calling him. Now they had children, so they were back and forth. And ideally, this would have worked. So I encourage just if you're not happy, just separate. But I wouldn't jump to a divorce right now.
Yeah,
Separate, give yourself some time, think about it. You've got kids, see if you can work it through, especially just for your kids. Just give it time. Don't jump into something new. Um, and the rule is the kids usually need about 6 months of healing when parents break up. As soon as you bring a new partner in, they hate that new partner, no matter
mm-hmm.
how good they are. It's just they feel like that partner broke up the marriage. So giving yourself time to heal, get yourself back, your own routines back. And he became very empowered, and she was reattracted to him and left the affair, and now they're together. So, I mean, there's bumps in the road very often with
For sure.
couples work. It's not the easiest work to do. Um, but, I'm always trying to empower both parties. That's my job.
For sure. So with
Yeah.
this much experience, I would like to ask you that question of, if you were to try and simplify, how would you describe a healthy relationship? What does a healthy relationship look like?
Okay. Well, that's part 4 of my book. So it's quite a few pages. Um, there's different things. I mean, some things I can sum up for my couples. I would always say it's the quote, it's you and me against the world. In other words, you have to put your partner first, not even the
Mm-hmm.
kids, not your parents, not your friends, because couples that put the kids first and get so wrapped up in the sports schedules and this and that and this and never date each other. By the
Mm-hmm.
time the kids are grown and out, they're divorcing because there's no romance. There's no fun time together. So you have to keep the fun and the romance together. I also teach a lot about keeping balance in your life, which I call balance triangles. So for a couple, the 3 equal sides are you, me, and us. So partner A's life, partner B's life. What does that mean individually? Well, that's your work hours, going to the gym, a little bit of time with your friends. But if you're just doing all you and you
Mm-hmm.
don't invest the time in the us portion, that's going to be a very unequal triangle, and that
Yeah.
relationship will suffer. So you're always looking about balance. For my singles, I always say be what you want to attract. You want someone emotionally healthy, you must get emotionally healthy first before even thinking of dating. And
Mm-hmm.
there's so many people out there looking to be rescued in dating world. It's like clean up your life first. Get the
Mm-hmm.
life you desire, make it perfect, because then when you're out there, your energy is so amazing. You have this incredibly blessed, fun life. And then you're not going to settle for someone that doesn't have their life together.
Yeah.
Right. So, yes, dating is a numbers game. But when you find someone else that has their life together and you do, then you make this amazing couple going forward with your individual and couple's dreams together. Because you're
Mm-hmm.
two people that have your life together and you're ready for that partner. So it's
Mm-hmm.
very important for the singles. And actually, on my website, I have 4 free love tests. One is, are you ready for a relationship? for the singles. And you have to look at it honestly. Is all your life areas in order before you go out to date?
Oh,
For
I
the
bet.
couples, I have the red flag checklist. So if you're thinking, should I go? Should I stay? Like you, back and forth to this relationship, look at how many red flags you're dealing with in the relationship. And if there's a lot of them, get help. I wouldn't say quit at first, but you've got to do something. And, I mean, a lot of people, this is why I don't do counseling anymore. It's like the model is they sit and talk and figure out their own problems. Coaching, it's like, okay, this is the research-based things that can help you fix your relationship or help you feel better. And that's what I teach, research-based techniques and real solutions. So people tend to love coaching, right? So if you're seeing, you're sure you go to someone. If you've had past trauma, go to a trauma expert that has a coaching and mental health hybrid going on. I know there's not a lot of us out there, but there's a few. If you're dating also, you've got to look for the top requirements that you want. So when I work with those aged 26 to 36, let's say it's a female, and I said, are you a woman that desires marriage and a family? She goes, oh, absolutely. Well, then we come up with her top 7 to 8 requirements. And the first one would be one of your first questions, whether it's on the phone or your first date, you have to ask the man in front of you, do you see yourself wanting to be married and be a father?
Yeah.
If he says something like, yeah, I guess I'll probably marry one day, and if she wants kids, I guess I'll have them too, that's a no.
Yeah.
If he says, I couldn't imagine my life without marriage and having kids, because definitely want to be a dad, that's a yes. So a lot of people want love so much, they fluff over the important stuff just because there's chemistry, one of the worst ways to fall in love. And you have to look at the real, life, goals. What are your goals? What are your requirements to be happy? One of my gay males said, well, he must love dogs. If he doesn't love dogs, he's not for me. And that was his first thing. And I said, put it down. That's important for you. Your dogs are like your children. So whatever's that important to you, you can usually name them pretty quickly. Like me, must love to dance. If they don't love to dance, I couldn't date them. Right? I was a real disco queen pie back in the day. So, and I still go to clubs and I dance and I love it.
Well, I would not qualify then because I'm a horrible dancer. So
can always learn. But things like that are important to you. Or the skier who loves the snow and the ski. Like I hate
that
snow.
I
I don't
do.
care if I see
That
another flake, right? So you got to know what you love that makes you happy, and these are your requirements for a partner. You don't want to compromise on theirs because you're going to regret it. So these requirements are very important that we nail those down. Then there's emotional needs that have to be identified, functional needs, and your wants and desires, right?
Yeah.
So we have to look at all of those. And the research said too, the happiest and longest lasting relationships do share spiritual practice, not really religious techniques like I have to go to church 4:00 on Saturday to get it out of the way because we're supposed to, but really being spiritual 24/7 in who you are, your personal accountability. Like you said, I have this value, I would never cheat. That's a spiritual value. So people that have these values, both of them, usually make for very happy, loving, successful couples.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're looking to match value systems and interests up front, basically, before something begins.
Well, in our U.S. culture, we were taught fall in love by chemistry. Our nursery rhymes like Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty, the handsome prince comes and he kisses her and they go away happily ever after, right? And it's all chemistry. Is she cute? Is he cute? And it's just the worst way to really fall in love. You really have to slow down. I describe it, the chemistry is the icing on the cake. But without the cake, the substance, that icing just melts. It's nothing.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to have that friendship, that foundation, those things in common, have fun, trust. He's got to be like your good buddy and your passion at the same time. Right.
Yeah. It's an interesting word, chemistry, because it very much describes what's literally happening in the brain with a new romance. I mean, it is, science has shown it's equivalent to a hit of cocaine, like, and
Yeah.
it's a feeling that essentially that euphoria is going to wear off. And when you look at a relationship 5 years in, 10 years in, you're looking at a deep personal friendship that is also a romantic relationship. But to me, each relationship that I look like that's deep into marriage, it's more akin to friendship than it is the early stages of passion.
Mm-hmm.
So to base a relationship, which you're right, that's one of the issues that I have, is the way that we're taught to go into a relationship is from that standpoint of chemistry, and yet it doesn't last more than a certain period of time. And then the only way to get that chemistry back is to go out and do something crazy, something that you might be against your values, might be, whatever it is, but you have to get that rush back.
Yeah. I mean, the chemistries are the dopamine, the serotonin, the phenylalanine running around in your brain. But
Yep.
the other thing that's happening is the unconscious, the subconscious is always attracted to what it knows.
Mm-hmm.
So it is picking up unconscious patterns from your past. And
Mm-hmm.
people of trauma attract people of trauma. So once your trauma is healed and you're well aware of the childhood traumas and how they show up, my clients have like 24 questions that they ask when they're out dating to see what level of traumas are still existing in
Mm-hmm.
that person's life. Have they healed them? Have they not? Because again, the research shows everybody has a little something, as well as childhood trauma goes through 3 generations.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you have it, your parents had it, your grandparents had it. I also recently just read a study. It was fascinating that people from the Holocaust developed a different gene in their DNA that was passed down 2 generations from all that stress and
Oh,
anxiety.
interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. So even the DNA can be changed through, severe trauma reaction or trauma over time. And of course, the Kaiser Permanente study showed, which is out of San Diego, they correlated those with unhealed childhood trauma with obesity and
Mm-hmm.
early disease and death and dying.
Yeah.
Right. So there was so much more of early death and illness like fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, irritable bowel syndrome, migraines, lack of sleep, all of that with unhealed traumas. And I read that. I think I came across that in like 2016. I'm like, yes, this is great. That their, which is called the ACE test, adverse childhood events, were very different than mine.
Yeah.
And I was shocked because they didn't have like being part of foster care. They didn't have bullying. They didn't have abandonment on their list.
Yeah.
There was a lot missing. They didn't have community trauma. Some of the family trauma, like if a parent's incarcerated, we both had that. But there was a lot missing, and that's was jointly done with the CDC, which added some of these components down the road. Now, abandonment's on their list, bullying's on their list, but I'm like, how could they miss that?
Mm-hmm.
So it was just interesting, but they did not look at love relationship or how childhood trauma impacts people in business or in life, like constant anxiety, constant depression, fear-based negative thinking. These are all life results. And they really just looked at mostly the disease model and how that was happening. But it's a great study to also read.
I
Yeah.
love it. Well, I have appreciated this conversation. It's been very insightful. And I really like hearing your take on childhood trauma and the way that it affects relationships. So thank you for joining me, Riana.
Thank you, Pa. You'd be my perfect client. You're adorable. I wish you great love and happiness. You certainly deserve it. And you're learning a lot by doing the research for your book and finding out more about this. So that's excellent. And now that you're more in tune and aware to it, just know, and I want the listeners to know that this definitely can be fixed. It can be healed. You can go out dating with a whole different, I call it conscious awareness. It's a full conscious awareness. And it just feels so good because you really then enjoy the dating process. It's not scary. You don't worry about it. You just go out with the attitude, I'm going to meet a lot of nice people. And one of them's going to click and you're going to be ready and they're going to be ready. And that's how it happens. So I just want to leave that with the encouragement and not to wait, create that life you desire and have the love that you deserve.
I agree. Sure. Well, you're very insightful. So we are going to, for all of our listeners, if you're watching, if you're listening, You guys can check out Riana's books as well as her coaching programs, everything she has available. We are going to include all the links in the show notes, or you can go to, I believe it's rianamilne.com, right?
It is. That's my website. You can find the 4 free love tests there. An ebook on childhood traumas right there on the homepage. Get that. It's like 32 pages. It explains this more. And the first 60 pages of both Live and Love Beyond Your Dreams are under the books section. Tons of articles. And then my podcast, Lessons in Life and Love with Coach Riana Milne. I think I have 230 tapes now on my YouTube channel, and I'm on every podcast platform.
That's awesome.
So I'm out there.
Thank you so much, Riana, for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.